Entry number 2, The Nightshift, based on a personal experience by Gemma 804. I have worked as a night security guard at an old rural hospital for 3 years. The facility sits on the outskirts of a small village in the Scottish Highlands, surrounded by rolling hills and dense forests. Built in 1943 during World War II, the East Wing originally served as a recovery facility for wounded soldiers. Most of the hospital has been modernized over the decades, except for the 5th floor of the East Wing, which has remained closed since 2011 after budget cuts forced the hospital to consolidate operations. My shift runs from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The routine is simple: hourly rounds through all accessible areas, monitoring security cameras and logging any incidents. I heard rumors from other guards about strange occurrences in the East Wing. Call buttons ringing from empty rooms, elevator stops on the 5th floor despite it being decommissioned, and the occasional sound of a gurney rolling when no one was there. The older local staff often mention that the Highland winters bring more than just snow to the old building. I dismissed these stories as typical night shift folklore until 3 months ago. It was 2:17 a.m. during a particularly bitter February night. The wind howled around the century-old stonework as I sat in the security office reviewing camera feeds. That's when I noticed movement on camera E4, which monitors the East Wing's 4th floor hallway. A woman in what appeared to be a nurse's uniform, but oddly outdated, like from the 1960s, was pushing an empty gurney toward the service elevator. I immediately radioed the other guard on duty, asking if he knew about any staff in the East Wing. He confirmed no one should be there at this hour. I decided to investigate, grabbing my torch and heading to the East Wing. The temperature dropped noticeably as I entered the wing. The fluorescent lights flickered intermittently, creating shadows that seemed to move independently. When I reached the 4th floor, the hallway was empty. No nurse, no gurney. Checked each room, finding nothing unusual until I reached the service elevator. The call button was illuminated, indicating it had been recently pressed. According to the indicator above the doors, the elevator was now stopped at the 5th floor, the abandoned floor. Against my better judgment, I pressed the call button. The elevator descended slowly, the mechanical whirring echoing through the empty hallway. When the doors opened, the elevator was empty. But I noticed something on the floor, a single hairpin, antique in design, with a small Scottish thistle emblem, like something from decades past. I picked it up and immediately felt a cold sensation run through my fingers, up my arm, and settle uncomfortably in my chest. The elevator doors closed before I could exit, and the car began ascending without me pressing any buttons. The indicator showed we were heading to the 5th floor. I pressed the emergency stop, but nothing happened. I tried the radio, but it emitted only static. As the elevator climbed, the lights flickered more intensely before shutting off completely, leaving me in darkness for several seconds before emergency lighting activated. When the doors opened on the 5th floor, I expected to see an abandoned hospital wing. Dusty furniture, covered equipment, signs of long disuse. Instead, the hallway before me was immaculately clean, brightly lit, and bustling with activity. Nurses in vintage uniforms moved purposefully between rooms. Doctors consulted charts. Patients sat in wheelchairs or walked slowly with IV stands. No one seemed to notice me standing frozen in the elevator. The scene before me was like looking through a window into the past, the hospital as it might have been decades ago. Then I saw her, the nurse from the security camera, pushing her gurney toward a room at the end of the hall. On the gurney lay a body, completely covered by a sheet. As she passed under a light, I noticed something disturbing. I could see the wall through her form. The elevator doors began to close, and I thrust my arm out to stop them. When they reopened, the hallway was dark, dusty, and abandoned, exactly as it should have been. It's the 5th floor as it existed in 2025. I conducted a quick sweep with my torch, hands shaking. The floor was clearly uninhabited, with dust-covered furniture and equipment draped in protective covers. No footprints disturbed the dust, except for mine as I stepped cautiously into the hallway. At the end of the corridor, Where I had seen the nurse pushing the gurney, I found a patient room with the door slightly ajar. Inside, everything was covered in dust except for one item, a metal patient chart holder at the foot of the bed. It was clean, as if recently touched. I approached it slowly and found a yellowed chart inside. The patient's name had faded, but the date was still legible. April 17th, 1964. The cause of death listed was cardiac arrest following surgical complications. The attending nurse's signature at the bottom was partially legible, just enough to make out the first, initial, and last name. I took a photo of the chart with my phone and left quickly, taking the stairs instead of the elevator. When I returned to the security office, I searched the hospital's online employee archives for nurses with that name. I found her, a nurse who had worked at the hospital from 1958 until her death in 1964, according to the records. She died during her night shift on April 17, 1964, the same date on the patient chart. The cause of death was listed as cardiac arrest, discovered when she failed to respond to an emergency call. Her body was found in the service elevator between the 4th and 5th floors. The article included a staff photo. The nurse in the grainy black and white image was unmistakably the same woman I had seen on the security camera. I still work the night shift at the hospital. I still make my rounds through the east wing. But now, when I pass the service elevator, I always take the stairs. Sometimes, during quiet nights, the elevator activates on its own, traveling between the 4th and 5th floors with no passengers inside. And occasionally, on the security camera feed, I glimpse the nurse continuing her rounds, eternally pushing her gurney toward the elevator, trapped in her final moments of duty. The thistle hairpin sits in my locker. I can't bring myself to touch it again, but I can't seem to throw it away either. Entry closed, but echoes remain.